Politicians are masters of the art of deception. Martin L. Gross, author. All right. Good morning and welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Today, this this bill review is actually going to be kind of interesting today. And the reason that it's interesting is because I'm doing 3 bill reviews, but don't worry, they're all basically the same. And what makes this actually interesting is as I started diving in, I found some interesting things, like not just the bills themselves, okay? Like there's that too, and they're relatively short and we'll go through them. But in this particular instance, I just was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. A lot of times bills will reference something. They will reference they'll say, a study shows this, and they kind of lay out this rationale. Like you might see it in the whereas clauses. They'll say, like, whereas 1 million people have had this experience or something, and so they're kind of like laying the foundation for why do we need this bill in the first place. And in this particular context, I was just kind of curious. I was like, oh, let me check these out. And so I started doing some research, and then I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And the last time I kind of went down a rabbit hole, and it was actually, and the funny part about rabbit holes is sometimes I go down a rabbit hole, and then like an hour later, I have determined that that was the wrong hole to go down. And then I'm like, well, crap, this is hours worth of work. That's not even going into the show. So there's a little bit of that, but I found quite a bit, and it was funny because this morning, as I was kind of like just putting the final touches on my show, I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And so I found another rabbit hole to go down, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." So, so I like I added some components to it this morning. So let's get a I love to start with. You know what? Let me back up real quick. I'm not wearing my usual, um, button-up shirt, and I apologize. Like, I'm looking kind of like I'm slumming it with this hoodie on, so I apologize. We're gonna get back to, looking a little bit more professional. I was running behind this morning, and I was just like, "Alright," uh, because different things are happening. Like, it's a very tight schedule in the morning, so I apologize if you're watching and you're like, "Dude, doesn't he normally dress a little bit more like like he's come to the office. It looks like is he one of these tech bros? Like he just shows up in a hoodie and he's like, I'm here to work, guys. No, I mean, well, yes, that's how I showed up today, but, we will get that resolved. So I apologize, just because, I think, I think you, the audience, deserve somebody, in this particular case, not talking about other shows, everybody can do what they want, but on my show, you deserve somebody that shows up on time, prepared, and looking kind of appropriate. It's not happening today, but, so that's where we are. We are where we are today. So anyway, let's watch this video because one of the things that I love to do is I love to look and see what has the news said about this. Because I am not a journalist. I am just a commentator. So I basically pull things together and then I say, let me get my perspective. And so I go dig and I do some research, but I don't consider myself a reporter because I'm not hunting down sources. I'm not like trying to get a quote from somebody. I'm doing is just bringing together a bunch of already available information for the public and then packaging it and saying, here's my perspective based on all of this information. So I always like to go and get some media stories. So let's start with that. Let's get this video going here. And this is going to be a video that's kind of like a prelude to these bills. So let's watch that. Maybe. Where did you go?
Guns stolen from cars is fueling the nationwide surge in teen gun violence. Every sheriff and police chief in the Bay Area has been saying this for years, and today some alarming new numbers back them up. Fox 13's Evan Axelbank is in the newsroom with a new report that says a little common sense could go a long way in reducing these crimes. Evan.
Well, Haley, even sheriffs who got elected in Florida on very strong gun rights platforms have begged people in their counties to take their guns inside and keep their car doors locked. A decade ago, nationwide, a quarter of gun thefts were from cars, but in 2022, that number was over half. Ava Boonstoppel thought she'd have a lifetime to share with her twin brother, Harrison. Instead, she has this.
We're together forever, and that's each of us.
20-year-old Harrison was killed in Ybor City the early morning of October 29th, allegedly by a 14-year-old who fired a stolen gun from Polk County.
I know.
Okay, so let's pause right here because we haven't even gotten to the bill itself. But there's a problem with this news reporting. And they said, now we want to be as respectful to victims and their family members and their friends as we possibly can. We also want to make sure that when we're talking about laws, that we get the facts correct. So what they just said is that her brother was killed, and this incident happened in 2023. And the reporting comes from like November, December timeframe of 2023. And so they're reporting and saying, hey, on October, I think it was October 29th, there was a shooting in Ybor City. And her brother was out. It appears that her brother was not causing any problems. He was literally an innocent bystander. And there were some people that got into an altercation and shot each other. And then I think somebody shot wildly or something. It's a little bit unclear to me. Because the full details didn't seem to be released as far as what's happening when you go back and you look. But as I was doing, and this is the research that I found this morning, is as I was kind of curious about this, I was like, oh, let me look more into this shooting because what we're talking about today is handguns in cars and how they're stored. That's the basis of the bills today. And so they just said like, hey, her brother was shot by a 14-year-old who had a stolen handgun. That's what they reported. Now, I want you to listen real quickly to the Tampa Bay Police Department. They did a press conference. And I don't know the dates exactly, but they did a press conference. And here's what the Tampa PD had said at the time regarding the gun that shot her brother. So let me play that real quick here. Let's see here.
Did you recover a gun from the suspect? This point is part of the ongoing investigation.
Okay, so if it's a little hard to hear, they asked him immediately. They said, "Hey, did you recover a gun from the suspect?" And he's like, "Hey, it's part of an ongoing investigation." Which, I mean, these kind of press release are not releases, but these press conferences, they tend to be like that. Like, you ask a bunch of questions and then you try to see what the whoever's speaking is willing to give you. And a lot of times, it's, well, there's an investigation going. We can't tell you. So then they get this question.
And with anything that has been connected to as far as the firearms, I know the state attorney was mentioning that people need to lock their doors. Are these stolen guns that we believe are involved here?
Okay, so before he answers, the woman in the red here to the right, she's the state attorney, and she was saying a few moments prior to this in the same press conference, she was saying, "Hey, we need you citizens out there to lock your doors. There's, a lot of handguns are stolen out of cars. So you need to be, you need to stop being part of the problem." So here's what the sheriff had to say.
Part of the ongoing investigation, but what I can tell you, and I said it in council this morning, is the amount of guns that are taken from cars is completely unacceptable. We've had over 200 guns taken from auto burglaries this year alone. And we have to have responsible gun ownership. There's too many guns getting in the hands of people that should not have them.
Okay, so in their press conference, he declined to say whether or not it was stolen, but then just kind of went on, well, yeah, a lot of guns have been stolen. Okay, but again, keep in mind, we're watching a news article or news story where they're reporting and saying this has been, this gun was, the gun that was used was stolen from a car, but we don't have any evidence of it. The only evidence that I was able to find, publicly, maybe it's there and just I'm not privy to it, but publicly the only information I was able to find was this press conference where he said, "Hey, you know what? I'm declining to say right now, but a lot of guns have been stolen." Okay, well, that's false reporting right there. Like you can't say that unless there's evidence of it. And the way that I see it, you shouldn't say that unless you're willing to show me the evidence, show me a police report, something that's documenting it somewhere formally. That way I know. Because again, the root of all of this is we're talking about passing legislation. And you know me, if you've been watching this show, you know me. One of the biggest red flags for me when it comes to legislation is whether or not that legislation is based on on an event that is actually connected. Like if we pass this legislation, would that have prevented this incident? Would that have in any way mitigated it? Right? Is it based on facts of the case, or are we extrapolating and just saying that all these bad things have happened? And this is not I've done bill reviews on bills where when you go and you dig into the reports that they reference, it's not like it doesn't support the bill, and that's a problem. We should not be passing bills based on because all we're doing is passing feel good legislation, right? Like I know people throw that word around and like, oh, feel good, like, but if legislation is not grounded in facts and in the legislation that's being passed or proposed would not have prevented that incident, then it absolutely is feel good. So let's get back to the news story. So I'm not going to say it's debunked entirely. I'm just saying, like, look, from a regular citizen standpoint, when I go looking to see, is this matching up? It's not. Now, it's possible that maybe I missed a police report that was, out there and just not really well publicized. It's possible that maybe they haven't put out the information, but it is true. But they did, somebody leaked it, if you will, to the news organization and said, "Hey, actually, yeah, it is true." And here's like I'm reading from the document. Like they could do a number of things, so it's possible. But I'm just telling you from a citizen's perspective, and we have a government for the people, by the people, right? Like I should be, as a regular person, able to find this information relatively easily, and I wasn't. So, and I went looking for it specifically. Okay, so let's get back to the video, and we're gonna continue watching this clip here.
The people that have the guns, oftentimes they don't want this to happen, but it's living in like your own bubble that it's not going to be you.
Everytown for Gun Safety, a group that argues in favor of more gun control, released a report saying that a decade ago, a quarter of gun thefts were from cars. In 2022, that number was over half, even though the rate of thefts from vehicles overall has gone down by 11%. They insist that permitless carry laws, like the one Florida passed in 2023, are having an impact.
During the pandemic, the gun sales really spiked. And so we know that there are more guns out there. But the second thing is that lawmakers are making it easier for people to bring their gun out of their home and into their car.
Everytown says states with the most pro-gun policies have theft rates nearly 18 times higher, or 81.3 thefts per 100,000 people, compared to 4.6. But
all right, so they're throwing a lot of numbers out there. Basically, what they're saying is when you look at states with stricter gun control laws, they have fewer of these crimes. And when you look at states with more loose, if you will, or more open, with fewer legislation limiting citizens, then there are more. Now, that's correlation, causation, possibly. And we would have to really dig into the data to find out, like, okay, is there some other reason for this? Is something else happening that's causing this? Or is it just the laws? Which is very interesting because like criminals, people that want to commit crimes are not really known for following people don't look like, when was the last time you saw a news story where they apprehended somebody, or maybe you were watching the televised court proceedings or whatever, right? You were and you found out that the person that's in question was like, well, I was actually a good citizen up until I saw that they loosened up the laws, and then I realized that was my opportunity, and so I decided to go for it. Like, that doesn't happen. And in the 14-year-old in question, when you look, you find that he has a long history. He's got like in one of the news reports that I was reading, he had like some, 15 or 16 cases against him prior. Right. So this was not his first go. He didn't just he was already breaking the law in multiple areas. And then he, at some point, shot somebody. Now it's unclear whether, how he acquired that gun. So maybe somebody else gave it to him. Maybe he stole it from a car. Maybe he, stole it from another criminal. Maybe he bought it from a criminal who stole it from there's any number of where, they could have stole it from a house. Who knows? I don't really know. That information isn't available. But again, the idea that criminals are just waiting for laws to open up and that they're otherwise law abiding as long as they're that's absurd. That doesn't even make here's how you can test that. Go at when you arrest somebody, what they should do is they should say, "Do you know what the laws are here regarding this?" And they should just interview, the interview, the questioning should just be like, "What do you know about the laws?" Because I'm willing to bet they don't really know them that well. Because they don't care, right? They're breaking it, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And if they're breaking the law, they're breaking the law. Some of them are obvious. If you're 14 and you're walking around with a concealed firearm, you're breaking the law. Like, you're not permitted to have it. Whether you should or not is a different matter, but you're not permitted to have it. If you shoot somebody because he said a mean thing to you, you're breaking the law. Now, can they cite the law? Can they make a general, abstraction about what is legal and not legal? Probably. But do they actually know the laws? Were they actually waiting for a law to just be lifted or be loosened so that they commit the crime? No, that's absurd. And that's what needs to be proven here. All right, let's continue.
Gauging the size of the problem in Florida is tricky. That's because only a third of states require reporting of lost and stolen guns, and Florida isn't one of them. The city of Tampa, for example, got 197 reports of a stolen gun in 2023, with 79% from unlocked cars.
It's in everyone's interest to make sure that we're collecting the data, that we're paying attention to laws and that lawmakers are paying attention to laws that are proven by research to make a difference in people's lives.
Local law enforcement have pleaded with the public.
But you got to give brother a hand here.
We're not telling you not to have it. We're just telling you to be responsible.
How much easier can it be than to just click a button?
Ava says it could save a life.
I think it gives me a little bit of hope every time I have a memory of him, even though it hurts.
Every town says.
Okay. So that's the news story. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary. I apologize, folks. I need to throw an intermission video up here real quick so I can grab my charger from my laptop. I just looked down. I was like, why is my laptop looking, a little dim? Turns out the battery's almost out, and I need to grab my charger. I was working this morning downstairs outside of the studio. So give me just a minute while I play this little intermission video, and then we'll be right back.
Let us make man. This is the scripture where God was talking about creating the human. And when he talked about creating the human, he said, let us make man. And for me, the us in let us make man entails and implies to me that I should be assisting God with making men. And this is where the X for Boys comes into play. This is the new man-making machine in Albany, Georgia. We started the X for Boys program in January of 2019. Albany, Georgia is one of the poorest cities in the nation. And also Albany, Georgia has one of the highest crime rates in the nation. And so I took it upon myself to curb that by working with young men and boys in the community and teaching them how to work in the skilled trades, such as working on cars, fixing houses, simple home improvement, simple brake repair, oil changes, plumbing, anything of that nature, to try and help boys actually use their hands.
I appreciate King Randall for taking the time out of his life to give us young men the opportunity to do things that can help us be better men and better people in life.
The X for Boys is creating men that'll be self-sufficient, that will be able to protect their women and children, and will be able to go out and earn things for themselves. We do not teach victimhood. There is nobody holding us down. I'm teaching the boys that they can go out and get whatever it is that they want when they want it to. They have the same Father as Jesus, and that is God. And so they are able to go and do whatever they want to. The scripture says, greater is the God that is in me than the God that's in the world. So it's up to us to teach them about the God that's in themselves and to create everything that they want. Let us make man. Follow us on social media at New Emerging King, and you can go to the xforboys.org for our website.
All right, we are back. I appreciate your patience there, folks. That was a little out of the ordinary. Okay, so, and by the way, I just want to point out, if you're not, what do you say, the New Emerging King, I think is what he called. That is a great account. He posts videos all the time of how he's working with young boys. I think local boys that, they're in the neighborhood, or, I'm not sure exactly how he comes across all the kids, but he has videos where he's like, all right, here's how you interact with the police so that you can go home and don't cause cause yourself to be in any more trouble. He's like, here's how to do this, here's how to do that. And he's like literally training young boys to be good, responsible young men, and then go into adulthood and be meaningful members of society. So very much appreciate that account. So I I will from time to time play, there's no sponsorship here. He doesn't even know I'm playing the video. I just happen to think he's doing good work, and I want you to know about it. So I'm playing that, and it actually worked out very well this morning, given the topic and the need to go and get my charger. So anyway, back on track now. So, we want to keep sympathy with the families, but at the same time, we want to be critical about the facts before we start passing legislation. So now that we have an understanding of what's going on, so like every town who I generally disagree with, that's not to say that their facts are necessarily wrong, but their perspective and their prescriptions are something that I would vehemently disagree with. They put out some information, and that plays a role in these bills, which you're going to see here shortly. So first, let's take a look at the bills and let's see what they say to begin with. So let's pull them up. So this one is there's three of them here. So this one, SB 190. These are out of Florida. All three of them. These are the Florida Senate. So these it says an act relating to storage of handguns in private conveyances and vessels. Okay, and so they're making some amendments and whatnot. So let's go down here. So here are your standard whereas clauses. What I want to do, normally I might read these. We're going to hold on to these just for a minute. Now, out of these three bills, two of them have these whereas clauses. This SB 190 does, and then another one does. We'll see that in a minute. But we're gonna wait to look at the whereas clauses. Now, if you're not familiar with the bill, if you've not read a bill, shame on you. But then the whereas clauses again lay a foundation, kind of like what's the need for this bill? Not all of them have it, but some of them do. And so in this one, they have, they list out their things. So let's skip on down to the actual changes that are going to be made. So down here, and any word that's stricken, it's got a line through it. That's going to be removed from existing statute. Anything with an underlined is being added. So it says a person may not store a handgun, whether loaded or unloaded, in an unoccupied, unsecured private conveyance or vessel unless the handgun is kept from ordinary observation and view and is secured with a device or mechanism that is securely affixed to the private conveyance or vessel or kept locked within a trunk, a utility, glove box, a utility or glove box, or other locked container. So in other words, making it simple, if you have a firearm in your car and you are not in it, it has to be locked up with something that is attached to the car. Basically you need like a safe or you need, a glove box. You can't just, you can't leave it under your seat. Under your seat doesn't count. Okay. In the glove box may or may not count if it's not locked up. And then they're also talking specifically about an unsecured car. So then we go down here and say, all right, well, we've got some definitions. The legal documents like to define things so that you are very clear what that word means. Private conveyance includes any motor vehicle as defined in, and it points to another part of the statute, other than a public conveyance. And then, so basically, any conveyance is basically a vehicle that takes you from one point to another point. That's effectively what it is. So if it's a vehicle of some sort, it could be your motorcycle, it could be your car, like that. Unsecured means a private conveyance or vessel that is unlocked or otherwise left open to entry. Now, I'm not really clear what otherwise left open to entry means. Presumably, they just simply mean if you did not lock it. So if you got your window rolled down, but it's locked, so I could reach in and maybe, or put a stick in there and hit the lock button, or if it's unlocked and I can just check the handle and open the door, then it's considered unlocked, right? Those kind of things. So basically, if I, as a person walking by, can get in your car, then it's unsecured without breaking it, without damaging, without, using a crowbar or anything, other tools. All right. Then it goes on, it says vessel has the same meaning as provided in, and it points to another part of the statute. So it's just pointing in the direction. So we've already got vessel defined. So fine. Each law enforcement agency shall engage in a promotional campaign to educate the public and handgun owners of the requirements of subparagraph A. So now this state law would require every law enforcement agency to initiate. That means they have to think about it. They have to develop it. They have to pay people. They have to maybe do commercials. They have to, do some social media, whatever. They have to engage in a promotional campaign. Guess what that requires? If you said, let me get my hand up here. If you said money, then go to the head of the class. So they're basically saying you have to spend more money. So when, and that's important because in the past, I've talked about how the Florida state has said if the police ask for more budget and then the cities don't give it to them, that they can either be overridden or they could be liable if the police later say, well, because we didn't get a budget, we didn't get that increased budget, we weren't able to protect citizens the way we were supposed to. Right? Like there's liability there. I talked about it in prior bill reviews. Okay, so now this is just adding more. So I want you to think about it. The state of Florida has already said, they made it harder to tell police departments, no, you can't have more money. Now they're turning around and they've got a bill that says, well, law enforcement, now you got to do things that require more money. Imagine that. Huh. That's fun. They basically said, you need to spend more money, which means you need to go get more money. And don't worry, we got your back because there are provisions that will help ensure that you get more money. How convenient. All right. What else we got? Each county shall adopt an ordinance imposing sanctions on a parent or legal guardian whose child under 18 years of age has been found to have stolen a handgun from a conveyance or vessel. Such sanctions must include, but are not limited to, parent education classes, community service projects, family counseling. What is the? Do you know what that means? What they're saying is they want to send parents to re-education camp. That's what they're saying. If your child commits a particular crime, they steal a handgun from an unlocked car, from a car. I don't think it said unlocked. Let me look back at that real quick. I don't think it had anything to do with being unlocked. Let's see here. It's been found to have a stolen handgun from a conveyance or vessel. Oh, okay. No, they just have to have it in their possession. Just in their possession. They didn't even have to be the one that stole it. So it's like, I'm holding it for a friend, mom, right? But which we know is not that's garbage. So if your child is under 18 and they get caught with a handgun that has been stolen, whether they stole it or not, you, the family, have to go to re-education camp, basically. Parent education classes, community service projects, and family counseling. I don't know what they're like. I don't know what their plan, what the hope is. Like, hey, Johnny, we're in parent education classes because you were doing something bad, and if we're just better parents, which I tend to agree with, but it's a little like here, you don't even have to be the one that committed the crime. They're not talking about like worrying about, I don't know, how did you get this? Where were you? What were you doing? What kind of things led to you do? They don't care about all that. They just want the parents to go to camp. So that's well, okay. There's a little bit more to the bill. Let me put it back up on the screen here real quickly. All right, where do we go? This way. Okay, so there's a little more to this bill, and don't worry, this is pretty much the basis for the rest of the bills. There's a little bit difference in one of them. So each county shall, no later than July 1st, 2025, adopt a local ordinance imposing sanctions on a parent or legal guardian whose child under 18 years of age has been found to have stolen. Now it says have found to have stolen a handgun from a conveyance. Okay, so now they're changing the language. So the bill is not even consistent and shall direct county law enforcement agencies to engage in promotional campaigns to educate the public and handgun owners in the county of their responsibilities under the ordinance. It is the intent of the legislature to provide for the most efficient and effective deterrent to juvenile theft of handguns from vessels and conveyances, tailored to local conditions and resources. So, like they're playing this game, like, hey, we're just creating this generic thing and saying counties got to figure this out. That's BS. Because here, I will demolish this bill in like a couple of sentences. If there is a child who is under the age of 18 and they stole a handgun from a car, like the neighbor's car, they're not listening to their parents any more than they're listening to the law. So getting the parents involved, I don't think is going to be all that more beneficial. I mean, just think about this. Like they're not listening to the law, the government, the people with guns. Like they know, like every 14-year-old knows if they're breaking into a car, the police could show up and they might get shot. They're not dumb. They may be brazen and think, oh, it won't happen to me. I'll be in and out. I'll just be super quiet. They may think a lot of these things, right? I'll cover my face so the ring camera doesn't see me. Like, I'm sure that they've got a lot of bravado going on about how this is going to play out, but they still know it could happen, right? That's why they'll take all these measures to ensure that it doesn't happen. But they're already not listening to parents. So there's like bringing the parents in and saying this is going to solve the problem doesn't make sense, because how is it going to solve a problem if we're already not listening? Like if they're out at 2 in the morning, did their parents say, yeah, you go ahead and hang out at 2 in the morning? Yeah, sure. Go ahead and check the car doors, see if there's anything cool in there. Like our parents actually say, like, no parents. Parents are probably already telling them, hey, you get your butt to bed. You stop stealing. You stop doing these crimes. I'm sure the parents have probably already said that, or maybe they're not involved. Okay, which kind of makes this, like we're already at a point where I don't want to say it's too late, but we're kind of already at a point where it's a little late. Like it might work if you're talking about a household where the child already respects the parents, but then if they're already respecting the parents and the parents are already involved, then guess what? The child is probably not committing any crimes. So for me, when I read this bill, it doesn't really seem like it's actually going to address the problem. It seems like it's just doing something so that some lawmaker, some representative can say, I did something. All right, let's take a look at the next bill here. So this next one, let me pull it up on the screen here, is going to be Bill 186. And let's see, where's my button there? Okay, so this is Bill 186. And so let me get over to it so I can read it. So this is basically the same thing. It doesn't have the whereas clauses. This was introduced by a different member. This is introduced by Senator Berman. And then the first bill that I read, 186, I'm sorry, 190, was by Senator Rosen. Okay, they're all Democrats. Just point that out. All right, so this one says requirements for safe storage of firearms and ammunition in motor vehicles and vessels. As used in this section, the term motor vehicle has the same meaning as in another part of the statute. Okay, so we're not adding any new definition here. Trunk means the fully enclosed and locked main storage compartment of a motor vehicle, which is not accessible from the passenger compartment. So that's interesting right here. I'm going to highlight that. That's not accessible from the passenger compartment. So does that mean like most trunks of newer cars? Because a lot of them you just like pull a button down and then, pull the seat down and then you can have access to the trunk. Also, I want to point out, does that not include SUVs? Like I have an SUV and there is no trunk for which would fall into this definition. So I don't have a trunk according to this. The term does not include a compartment that has a window, the bed of a pickup truck, or the rear area of a hatchback, station wagon type motor vehicle, or sport utility motor vehicle. Okay, great. So they've clarified it for me, right? They've answered some of my questions. Cool. Vessel has the same meaning as elsewhere. A person who stores or leaves a firearm, whether loaded or unloaded, or ammunition in a motor vehicle or vessel under his or her control, while the person is not in the motor vehicle or vessel, must keep the firearm or ammunition locked inside the trunk, inside of a locked utility or glove box, or inside a locked container securely affixed to the motor vehicle or vessel. Okay. So basically the same thing. It's basically the same thing. But this one does something different. Rather than send parents to re-education camp, a person who violates this subsection commits a misdemeanor of the second degree, punishable as provided in these sections of the law. So now what they're trying to do is they're saying, okay, well, if you don't lock it up according to the way that we say you should, you are guilty of a crime. So this is exactly, like they say the average American commits 3 felonies a day. This is how that happens because they just make crimes out of thin air. So I want you to think about it. From a libertarian perspective, this is not a crime. Why? Because number one, it's my car. You should not be going in it in the first place. The moment that somebody opens my car door without my authorization, you are committing a crime. You are in the wrong. I should not have to be punished because the police can't figure out how to deal with this crime over here. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to compensate, and they're saying, okay, you know what? We can't take care of it. So we'll punish the guys who may be responsible. And I get it. It sounds really appealing, right? Like, hey, you should just lock up your gun. But also I could just say, hey, you should keep your 14-year-old in at night instead of prowling around the neighborhood at 2 in the morning checking car doors. How about that? How about we deal with that? The child should, every 14-year, there is not a single 14-year-old in this country who goes prowling around at 2 in the morning checking car doors who doesn't know they're wrong. Deal with that. That's the problem. The problem isn't that I left it in there. Okay. Now I wouldn't do that, but like people accidentally make mistakes sometimes. They put it in the center console maybe, and then they rush into the house because they're running late from work and they're trying to get ready for dinner or whatever. People, life happens. So I get it. And so now they're gonna now people are gonna be penalized for it, because there's an increase of thefts because they can't figure out how to lower the thefts. So what they'll do is they'll punish the person that's making the thefts more possible. That's really what it amounts to. All right, so let's look at that third bill, and then we're going to get into the really fun part about this. So let's go back to the bill here real quick, and let me see here. Boom, there we go, and this. Okay, so this is the House version now. So those first two bills were the Senate bill. This is the House version of it. And this is actually similar to the first one. So as we go down, we see an act relating to storage of handguns in private conveyances and vessels. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's very basically the same. You've got the whereas clauses. You go down here and it says basically the same thing. You have to lock up your firearm in your car, and has the definitions. Scroll down here. Law enforcement has to engage in promotional campaign, and then re-education camp for parents that don't play ball. So that's basically it. There is, let's see here. And this one does not have any associated misdemeanor. So there's no, like, this one is not like the first, this House bill is like SB 190 in that it does not create any criminal penalties for somebody who leaves their firearm in their car. Now let's get into the whereas clauses. I think we've kind of just discussed this bill enough. Like the bill's junk, right? Like it's all it's trying to do is in some way penalize the victim, because if you steal from me, I am the victim. Okay. And it's not acceptable to say, well, you should have locked your front door, DL. If you had your front door locked, somebody wouldn't have snuck in at 2 in the morning and stolen your TV. Like, no, like in theory, I should be able to leave my door unlocked and nobody enter in. Now, that's not the world we live in, but I shouldn't be penalized for it. That's the problem, because I'm the victim. You came into my house unauthorized. You came into my car unauthorized. And this is the problem with law, right? With legislation, is that we start wildly firing everywhere. So let's go back to these whereas clauses, because this is where it gets really interesting. So I'm going to read these kind of quickly, and then I'm going to tell you this little quick story about how I got to where I got. So whereas on average, at least one gun is stolen from a car every 9 minutes in the United States. Okay, we're talking about a Florida bill. Just point that out. Whereas the rate of gun thefts from cars is triple what it was a decade ago. This includes both consistent increases nearly every year over the decade and a marked spike during the recent pandemic. So again, now they don't state it here, but when you look at the data, they are talking about the United States. This bill is for Florida. Whereas a decade ago, roughly a quarter of gun thefts were from cars, but in 2022, over half of gun thefts were from cars. And okay, so again, we're still talking at the national level. They haven't given none of these whereas clauses so far has said anything about Florida, even though we're passing legislation for Florida, or they're trying to. The truth is, and let me just show this up on the screen here real quickly. The truth is, this is the makeup right here. I'm showing a picture on the screen, the makeup of our state legislature. So we have 120 House members. We have 40 members in the Senate, and it's Republican dominant. So these bills aren't going to pass anyway, because the Democrats just simply don't have the votes, and it's unlikely that Republicans are going to be pushing these bills. Like they're not going to support them, more than likely, which is good. But the fact that these legislators are even presenting these bills, I think, is a problem, and we should really hammer at our legislators when they're doing this. and say, no, that's a crap bill. You should have never brought it to the table. That was unacceptable, but you did. And so now you should be punished for it. Maybe we don't elect you again. That's how you get better legislation. You hold people accountable for the trash. Like if my boss were to say, hey, will you design a really fancy Excel sheet? And then I say, yeah, sure. But then I do something that's like they didn't even ask for. Like, or that, like that's trash. Like it doesn't even make sense. I'm gonna be in trouble. And the same thing should happen here. These people are putting in work, they're putting together something, and they're expecting it to get passed. And and if it were to get passed, they will go out and say, I helped lead the charge on getting this bill passed, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Well, that's great when the bill passes and then you get to boast about it. What about when the bill's trash in the first, whether it passes or not? What about when the bill's trash? Why don't we hold them accountable for that? Like we need to. Otherwise, you just get garbage like what we're getting. All right, so let's get back to our whereas clauses. And let's see here. So, whereas cars parked at residences are the most common source of stolen guns, demonstrating the importance of securely storing guns at all times and locations. I actually don't disagree with that. Like, and the facts above may actually be true. Not disagreeing necessarily, but I am going to point out that so far none of this is Florida specific. I think there's two more. Whereas cities in states with the weakest gun safety laws see nearly 18 times the rate of gun thefts from cars as those in states with the strongest gun laws. Okay, still not talking about Florida. You're comparing different states, but maybe Florida was one of those states that was compared. We'll check that out in just a second here. Then finally, whereas the legislature finds that is the responsibility of parents to supervise their children under 18 years of age. Okay, that is the only thing that you could make an argument is meaningful in Florida. And to be honest with you, if you need to craft a law that says, hey, we find that's responsibility of parents to supervise their underage kids, I will laugh at you because of course, duh. Are we at a point where we actually got to put that in the law? Really? That's where we are? Oh, it's terrible. Okay, so let's get to the really fun stuff here because I started searching some of these things. And initially, it didn't occur to me when they in the media in the news broadcast when it said every town. Now, if I was kind of focused on these facts. I was like, all right, where's this study coming from? Who wrote this? And I was thinking it was like, some group that I'd never heard of, or a couple of political scientists who were just curious about the data. So that's where I was thinking. So I just didn't really even click every town. Okay. And so then where do we are? We want to do this. Yeah, there we go. So hold on, let me swap okay. So my first landing was at PBS. Okay. So here's this PBS article. Guns are being stolen from cars at triple the rate they were 10 years ago. Firearm safety group every town says. Now, I read the headline, didn't click. Okay. And then I see the rate of guns stolen from cars in the U.S. has tripled over the last decade, making them the largest source of stolen guns in the country. An analysis of FBI data by gun safety group Everytown found. So okay, cool. So FBI data. The rate of stolen guns from cars climbed nearly every year and spiked during the coronavirus pandemic, along with the major surge in weapons purchases in the U.S., according to the report, which analyzes FBI data from 337 cities in 44 states and was provided to the AP. Okay, great. So I searched FBI data from 337 cities in 44 states because it just didn't click that they literally told me it's from every town. So then one of my results was every town. So I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere. So now at first I'm thinking every town is just reporting it. Who actually did the study? So then I read, and it says right here, New York, every town for gun safety support fund today released a new report highlighting a sharp increase in the number of firearms being stolen from cars across the United States. Oh, now it clicks. Okay. Now I'm like, oh, the people that conducted this study was Everytown, or their organization, Everytown for Gun Safety Support Fund. So it's maybe it's companies have different branches or whatever. Maybe it's a satellite company or something. I don't know. So anyway, so they've got a link here. Released a new report. So I go to the report. Gun thefts from cars, the largest source of stolen guns. 5/9/2027. 2027. 2024. I don't know why I said that. So then key findings. Remember those whereas clauses? On average, at least one gun is stolen from a car every 9 minutes in the United States. So that's what it says on Everytown's bullet point. Let me read you what it says in the legislation. Whereas, on average, at least one gun is stolen from a car every 9 minutes in the United States. Well, that's interesting. That's like word for word. The rate of gun thefts from cars is triple what it was a decade ago. This includes both consistent increases nearly every year over the decade and a marked spike during the pandemic. Whereas, I'm reading from the law now, the legislation, the rate of gun thefts from cars is triple what it was a decade ago, including both consistent increases nearly every year over the decade and a marked spike during the recent pandemic. Cars parked at residences and driveways outside homes are the most common source of stolen guns, demonstrating the importance of securely storing guns at all times and locations. Where's that one? Whereas cars parked at residences are the most common source of stolen guns, demonstrating the importance of securely storing guns at all times and all locations. The legislators in Florida literally lifted the bullet points from Everytown and just stuck it in this legislation that they wanted to pass. Now it won't pass, and they'll, if and when it fails, it's most likely will. If and when it fails, they'll clamor on and be like, "Well, we tried to do something about." Yeah, what you did was you plagiarized. You drafted a bill with plagiarism. You couldn't even be bothered to rewrite it. That's crazy. But it gets worse. So, the video initially that I showed you at the very beginning talks about a shooting in Ybor City, okay, over in the Tampa area. And then we played a clip from the Tampa PD talking about it. And there was speculation, but no actual evidence presented that the shooter, a 14-year-old boy, acquired the gun that was either he stole it from a car or it was stolen from a car. He wouldn't say, but then went on to say too many handguns are being stolen from cars, which I would agree. One stolen from a car is one too many. Okay. But then as you look at all these news stories, you start to see something interesting. So, like in PBS, right here, says the stolen weapons have in some cases turned up at crime scenes. In some cases, not always. In July of 2021, a gun taken from an unlocked car in Riverside, Florida. Scroll down here. Stolen guns have been linked to tragic accidents, such as when a 14-year-old boy in St. Petersburg, Florida, killed his 11-year-old brother after finding a gun in an alley. Because that wasn't even stolen. That had been stolen from an unlocked car. So it got ditched. A kid found it and accidentally killed his brother, which is a very tragic situation. Okay. So you keep seeing these references to Florida, right? And then we go to here on July 22nd, 2021, a gun was stolen from an unlocked car. 12 days later, the gun was used in the murder of a 27-year-old U.S. Coast Guard member as she attempted to intervene in neighborhood car burglary. Okay. So you've got like three? There's 4 different stories out of these sources that point to Florida. So I'm like, wow, is Florida really off the hook? So according to Everytown, here's their little chart. Explore trends in gun thefts from cars by city. Now, the first one here by default is Tennessee. And so what they've got it set up is that you can select your state and then you can select a city because they did 337 cities. And so I'm like, oh, cool. Let's go see what the data looks for Florida. So I click on it. Here's all the states that they evaluated, right? As we go down the line, Delaware, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas. Wait a minute. Kansas. Wait a minute. There's no Florida. Florida's not in this list. All of this. So, legislator plagiarizes for the bill. All these reports start pointing toward incidents in Florida. but the data doesn't show anything about Florida. Now we can look at some of these states and we can see in various cities. So, like if we look at Tennessee and Memphis, Tennessee, it's gone up. Chattanooga starts to come down in 2022. Let's see, Nashville, it goes up. We can look at, let's say, Connecticut, right? So we look at Connecticut, and then we see, let's check out New Haven. Up, New Haven's spiking all over the place, right? Stanford. That had a really precipitous drop there in 2021, almost down to zero. So they're down. Let's see. Let's take a look at, I'm just randomly selecting here. Let's look at Michigan. I don't expect much from Michigan. Ann Arbor. Oh, Ann Arbor is down. That's kind of interesting. What about Detroit? Okay, Detroit is up. So we have a mix of cities that are up and down in terms of reported reports for guns being stolen out of cars. And our legislature here in Florida, at least 5 members, there are 5 members that are involved in these 3 bills. 5 members of the legislature. They're filing bills that have plagiarism, and the basis of the whole argument doesn't even include data from Florida. Like, that's what they want us to pass a bill on. And so then when people wonder, like, DL, why do you oppose bills so much? I don't know. How about because they're based on nothing? Like, we don't even have the data to say what's going on in Florida. Is Florida up or down? Maybe certain cities are up or down. Like, think about this for a second. Let's say they evaluated 3 cities. Let's say they evaluate Jacksonville, Orlando, and Miami. And let's say that Miami's up, but let's say Orlando happens to be down and Jacksonville's down, which, by the way, I believe the Jacksonville Police Department has said that murders were at an all-time low, right? So presumably, if people aren't shooting people in large numbers, then maybe they're not stealing guns either, presumably. It could be a false assumption, and that's fine. But let's just say that two of the 3 cities are down. Well, then that might represent a particular problem in Miami that needs to be addressed, but we don't really need state legislation for it because, the other 2 cities seem to be on the downward trend. What are they doing that maybe Miami should do? Maybe, right? That's how we should evaluate laws. We shouldn't just make laws based on the national trend that may or may not apply to our state or may apply sporadically to different cities. But no, we're going to pass legislation that's based on data they don't have, that includes a lot of anecdotal stories. And I hate to use the word anecdotal, but I don't want to call them data because it's not like a data set, right? And these are true stories. So there's not anecdotal in the sense that, like, we can't verify them. Yes, we know that these people were shot, right? We know that these people were caught with guns that they didn't own. So that we can be sure of. But the problem here is that they're just making up bills. And then they're not even like, did they even read the bill? I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say that the person that wrote these bills, if it was the lawmaker and, the representative, they just literally copied and pasted and, said, all right, here's our whereas clauses. And they didn't, I bet you not a single one of those 5 people did the amount of research that I did so I could criticize their bills. Put money on it. I'd put money on it. That's why I oppose bills so much. Because when I start digging into the bill, I find out it's based on garbage. That's unacceptable. And I shouldn't have had to do this. We should have lawmakers that are at least going to be honest and present a bill. And if I go digging into it, I should say, okay, you have a point. Here's an alternate way of addressing that problem, right? That's the conversation we should be having. Because as a libertarian, it's not that I don't agree with laws per se. I just think that a lot of laws are unnecessary and that there are better ways to address things, depending on what the situation is. And in some cases, there might need to be a law, right? But again, might need. What is the scope of the problem? Does it apply to Florida? Well, we don't even know. And by the way, the reason, if you're curious, like why Florida wasn't included, they weren't being shady, every town. When you look into the data further, and they've got it on in their report, that they chose cities that were reporting to the FBI. So the FBI has a database, and if cities aren't reporting if there's not a particular percentage of reporting that's happening, then they just ruled them out. They said, okay, you're not reporting enough, so we can't include you, which is actually a good thing. I can appreciate that. So if 44 cities, 44 states had cities that were giving them a sufficient amount of data to make them relatively equal in terms of the amount of data that they have to work with, which then gives you a good sense of the scope of the problem or the scope of the improvement, right? Then that's a good thing. I will give them credit for that. But our lawmakers, all 5 of them, should be run out of office. Every one of them. And I can give you their names. Just we'll put it on record. We'll give you their names. So it's going to be Florida House Yvonne Hinson, District 21. Florida House Anna Escamani, District 42. Florida House Christine Hunskowski, I think it's how you say her name. Florida House District 95. And then 2 Florida senators. Florida State Senator District 16, Daryl Rousen, and Lori Berman, District 26. So those are your 5 people that need to be canceled. They need to be run out of office, and we should be very, very tough on our legislators, because when we're not tough on them, then they pull stunts like this. Now, in this particular case, again, this legislation isn't going to pass, but you might remember some bill reviews I did last year from Republicans that did pass that had equally terrible issues with them. We need better. If we're going to have legislation, good legislation, and the bar should be high. And if you're not up to the job, then kick you out. We'll call you a DEI hire. All right, let's get some comments here real quick, and then we're gonna end the show. All right, let's see what we got here. Doesn't look like there's anything directed at me, just some conversations. Keith, or who is it? Kagella. I can't say that word, but says it's too cold. Yes, it is. It is too cold. It was like 50 degrees when I went out, which is still too cold. Let's see. Every town, aka Moms Demand Action. Yes, a group of bored housewives who need a hobby. That's from that Liberty lady. Yes, that's who Every Town is. Now, I will tell you, folks. Just because I disagree with the prescriptions that come out of Every Town doesn't necessarily mean that the data that they put out is necessarily wrong. It's just a matter of what do we do with it. But the first step is to evaluate it and say, am I coming to a similar conclusion? Do I see any reason that that maybe you made a mistake in your data collection or your analysis, and that's that sort of thing. And so that's why I said, like, look, I'm good with them excluding some states. Make sure that you're comparing like things. Don't compare a state that had, in a city that has reported only a few things, 5, when there's probably a whole lot more, versus one that's maybe reported like 100,000. So, and there's more that you could get into, and we could dismantle more of, their data. But I just really wanted to take apart the issue with the bills, because that was a big deal to me. Let's see. Okay, so are there any other comments here that I should probably address? Let's see here. More taxes? No. More bureaucracy? No. But that's what we get. Let's see. If government were good at parenting, there would be a lot less violent in public schools. That is a really, really phenomenal point. Who's that? That's Peg Leg Performance, I think. Why is my screen all being all funny like this? Let me move my I adjusted my screen a little bit, and now it's not being. Anyway, I can't see the full name. I don't know why it's being pain. Anyway, yes. Performance. Yeah. Peg Leg Performance. Okay. So if government were good at parenting, there'd be a lot less violence. But, public schools have entirely too much violence, like a lot. Like in the 90s, I had to go through metal detectors. Okay. In the 90s, right? Like mid 90s, I was going through metal detectors to go to high school. They've been violent for a long time now, and they've been very violent. I've said this before on the show, that when I when I was in 8th grade, the neighbor girl, her name was Angel, and she told me she was a year ahead of me. And she said, look, when you come to this school, because she went there and then I think she went to a different school for the next year. But she said, when you come to this school, she goes, let me tell you something. The fights that you're used to are different. They're not the same. She said, the fights that you're used to at your nice little Catholic private school, that's like a black eye, maybe, maybe a bloody nose. And that's about it. And she was right. And then she said, but when you come to this school, the fights end up with puddles of blood on the floor. And she also was right. And the ambulance called. And I remember the ambulance got called multiple times. Not for me, but the fights were pretty rough there. And the violence was pretty bad. Like they were physically more violent. And I could go on all day long on stories that I remember from my childhood going to public schools. So, they're absolutely violent. And so maybe they evaluate and say, how do we deal with the violence in public schools, so that maybe kids can come to school and learn. And I'm not even talking about mass shootings. I'm just talking about regular everyday violence, which was a prelude to mass shootings. Anyway, let's see what else we got here. I'm thinking a parent that is not monitoring their 14-year-old is not going to see a change with re-education, Kagela said. Yeah, you're right. Like if you're already not monitoring, like my mama, when I was 14, I'd be like, hey, mom, I'm going to go to the park and meet with my friends. And she's like, okay. And then I'd be at the park and we'd like see my mom just drive by. Like, where's my mom going? And I found out later she was going to check and see if I was where I was supposed to be. Right. She was always checking up on me. Now I still got around her a little bit, because, kids are clever. That's how they do it. Like their job is to try to find ways around their parents. And I did. But my mom was pretty vigilant. And I think her vigilance kept me out of even more trouble than I got into. All right, let's see. I think that's it for today. There's a lot more comments, but I can't get to them all. But I want to I appreciate everybody watching this show today. Thank you so much. By the way, do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode, especially since I'm doing something a little bit new now. I'm on Rumble, so I don't think it sets up a YouTube like ahead of time. So it just kind of like starts playing and then like So the bell is actually even more important than ever before. And while you're at it, if you want to support this show, please go to libertydad.locals.com. That's where you can really support this show. Sign up as a subscriber there. And then what happens is I'm going to be having conversations with people. That's where I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to people and be like, hey, what do you think? And if you want to blast me and be like, dude, your show sucks, which would be weird if you're subscribing to me. But if you want to say, hey, I've got some ideas, maybe you don't say that. Maybe you say, hey, I've got some ideas that could really improve the show. I think it'd be great. That's where that's the best place to get it. Like you can help drive the show over at libertydad.locals.com. That's going to be a phenomenal place. I will do monthly shows only for subscribers where maybe we talk about it. I answer your questions, whatever it is that you guys want. That's where you help the show. And this, that help goes toward me making a better show because there's lots of resources out there that I would love to have. But we got to be financially responsible so that I can criticize the government for not being financially responsible. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. Dad Talk is my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. That occurs every Friday morning, 7:30, or maybe 6:30 p.m. for dads that are not able to make it at that early in the morning. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel or my Rumble channel if you prefer. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com or rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember that if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you tomorrow. But for now, I'm out.